Hello and welcome to The Protected Life. Today we had episode 3 scheduled with Caleb Causey and Dr. John Adine. Dr. Adine is currently in surgery right now, unrelated to what it is that I'm about to talk about, but there have been reports over the past 30 minutes of a spree killer on a college campus in Roseburg, Oregon, and we're going to shift gears a little bit today to discuss. We're going to stick with medical aspects for part of the show, but we're going to start discussing some tools and strategies that you folks can use should you ever find yourself in this type of a situation. First of all, I do want to say that our hearts go out to the community in Roseburg, Oregon, to the folks at Umpqua Community College, to the families and friends of the 10 people that are reported dead today. That's from the Oregon State Police. That report has come. There may be more. We've seen reports of as many as 15 dead and 20 wounded. And so when we think about that number of people in one place, in one circumstance that are injured, it becomes crystal clear that medical knowledge, medical tools, medical skills are going to be critically important for people's survival. End of story. And so that's where we're going to head today. So let's start off by welcoming our guests. First of all, Caleb Causey of Lone Star Medics. Caleb is out of Texas, a former Army medic and the owner of Lone Star Medics. Caleb travels the country teaching folks in law enforcement, in the military, and average day folks just like you and me how it is that they can deal with medical emergencies. So Caleb, thanks for joining us today. I appreciate you coming and taking the time. How are you today?
Doing well, considering the news that we're hearing right before we decided. But yeah, again, our thoughts and prayers to the folks in Oregon. It sounds like it's pretty kind of a bad deal going on up there.
Yeah, of course, the information that's coming in right now is quite spotty, and so this close to the actual onset of the incident, we don't really have much in the way of facts. So we're not going to be talking specifically about those facts, but we are going to talk specifically about concepts that surround the medical aspects of dealing with a spree killer and the aspects of how it is that you can avoid being involved in the immediate situation if possible. And one of the experts in the nation in that is Rob Pincus. Rob Pincus is the owner of ICE Training, the developer of the Combat Focused Shooting Program, executive director at the Personal Defense Network, and one of the developers, or maybe the developer of the School Attacker Response course. And so Rob is someone I reached out to as this news was breaking and said, Rob, let's jump on. You might remember him from the second episode of The Protected Life. Rob, how are you doing today?
Pretty good. We got baby Pincus here with us on the show at the last minute since we weren't expecting a little hangout. So
absolutely.
He's going to chime in maybe. We'll try to keep her participation to a minimum. It's a crazy day. I posted a few minutes ago, about 10 minutes before you contacted me about this. Day was going so well. And sure enough, 15, 10, 7, if anybody gets killed anywhere by a murderer that's bad, and when it's at a school and when it hits on the nerves of so many people, both pro-gun, anti-gun, pro-defense, pro-personal responsibility, and then obviously the advocates for self-defense, as well as those who would say, well, it's all in the hands of the police and the professional security and the government can handle it. Everybody is riled up right now. So I appreciate you sort of shifting gears and inviting me to help hopefully calm people down. I think that's the number one thing. And we learned that that's really that was the emphasis of where School Attacker Response Course came from. It was parents asking me and asking ICE Training Company and asking Personal Defense Network, what do we say the day after or the evening of Sandy Hook when our kids ask these questions at the dinner table? Well, not to sensationalize or jump on this or be part of that media frenzy, but more to say, hey, we know these things can happen at any time, and we have answers. Lone Star Medics has answers. Safety Solutions Academy has answers. IC Training Company has answers. We're all members of Personal Defense Network. We have answers, and let's provide some of those to people that are anxious for them right now.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Rob. Let's shift gears a little bit. First of all, I want to welcome Dr. John Adine. Obviously, very clearly, Dr. Adine. How you doing? We can see that you are still right there. You've been busy today.
Yeah, I just finished number 5, getting ready to start number 6. So
Outstanding. Well, just to bring you up to speed, John, I'm guessing being in surgery, you may not have information about what's going on in the world right now, and so I want to let you know we've kind of shifted gears with the show a little bit today. We've got reports of an active killer about 30 minutes ago at Umpqua Community College in Roseburg, Oregon. Reports from Oregon State Police are 10 dead. There are some reports of more than that, and there are reports of 20 wounded. And so, this unfortunate set of circumstances really makes us start to think about solutions and maybe some strategies that can help people comfort themselves as they think about having to go on with their lives in this kind of a situation. And so what I'd like to talk about today, Dr. Edin, is the idea of medical skills and strategies that we can use, as well as some skills that Rob might be able to present to us with regards to surviving these kinds of situations. And I know that you are involved in dealing with gun-free zones. So Dr. Edin, let's start there right now, if you don't mind. You are the membership director of Doctors for Responsible Gun Ownership. Tell us a little bit about your role in that organization and what it is that your goals are with regards to gun-free zones.
Oh, first of all, yeah, as a membership director, we're trying to grow the organization. Not only is it's not really just doctors, it's doctors, nurses, administrators, technicians, EMTs, pretty much anybody that we can, who has a stake in the medical game, we want to have input and to be part of our team. As far as gun-free zones, I've been talking about gun-free zones over the last couple of years when I first started this. I tried to get a resolution passed through my county medical society in 2013 and hit a brick wall with that. We've been trying to work through the legislature in Texas, and there was actually several good bills this year. None of them made it out of committee. I've talked with my own hospital administration. I actually put a petition together and I took it around the hospital and got almost 500 signatures of hospital employees that were amenable to having hospital staff be armed. I think that's part of the plan, but it's not all of it. I think it can act as a deterrent if it's out there. If there's an active shooter and he knows that there are people in a facility, it could be a hospital, school, whatever, it's probably not going to be his first choice. They don't want interdiction. They don't want to have they want to have a easy go of it. These guys plan this stuff out for sometimes years in advance, and so they pick their targets very carefully. Once you're in the middle of that situation, then it's really a matter of stopping the bleeding, keeping the airway going. It's all that basic life-saving skills that Caleb has probably done a lot of. I actually don't do a whole lot of that stuff. I'm the one that gets them when they get here, where I have to fix them and put them back together again. But you still have to get the bleeding stopped, make sure they got an airway, make sure they have a heartbeat, and then get them stabilized, whatever you can stabilize, and then transport them to a facility where you can get definitive care.
And one of the things that you're working at, and one of the reasons why you're concerned about the gun-free zones, is it's simply a more attractive place to harm people. And you mentioned very specifically that the idea is it's going to take more time for someone to intervene and stop that event if you're in a place where guns are not allowed. Because good people don't take guns where they're not allowed. That's really what it comes down to. And you work in one of those places. Absolutely. And you'd like to see that change.
Absolutely. I definitely would like to change it.
Yeah.
These guys plan these things out. As Masad Ayub says, they're hunting grounds for psychopathic murderers because these guys know that nobody's going to be available to stop them. And you think about a hospital, it's a 10-story building that covers 4 square blocks. Somewhere in that building something's happening. Even if there's a police officer standing in the emergency department, how long is it going to take that guy to get to wherever this problem is? It can take them minutes, and every minute is how many people shot or killed.
Sure. Yeah.
So that's the thing that my concern is. The other thing is when you have good guys who are armed, we need to make sure that the police know who they are, so the responding guys don't shoot the good guy in the back. That's the other thing. So I foresee something like working with the police or sheriff's department with the hospital folks so that we know who we train together, we know who we are, and so when they show up, they see me and they know me as a good guy, not as a bad guy.
And those are important considerations, John, and I really appreciate that you're looking at, number one, working to help people be able to defend themselves in that situation, but also realistically looking at some of the challenges. You know, even law enforcement agencies have difficulty working with plainclothes officers that are part of the same department at times, and so those are realistic things that need to be looked at. So I applaud you for that. Rob, I want to head to you for a second because, you know, the best way to deal with some kind of a violent encounter, the best way to deal with a medical emergency that ensues from a violent encounter is to avoid it all in the first place. And as hard as Dr. Edin is working to try and reduce the number of gun-free zones, there are gun-free zones out there, and we have to spend time in those gun-free zones depending on our lifestyle and what it is that's going on. So what strategies do you have for folks to be able to avoid the situation altogether? Should we all just stay home and lock the doors? What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, that's not obviously a practical exercise. I think that there are daily, almost, I have conversations, certainly every week I have conversations with people who have taken our training or students or engaged in our social media that ask about, you know, going to a theater that's marked without guns, or going to a restaurant or going to a mall. And, you know, it's all the same question. Should I carry concealed anyway and hope I don't get caught? You know, the old judged by 12 instead of carried by 6 idea. Should I carry because it's not illegal, it's just a sign that doesn't have the power of law that the property owner wishes someone not to carry? Or should I just not go there? You know, and I don't advocate breaking the law. I am a strong fan and proponent of individual private property rights, and I don't think that the government should be able to tell people what they can do with their property anymore. Certainly not as much as they do now, certainly not anymore. So it is kind of a lifestyle choice. Do you choose to always have a gun and think that that's always going to keep you safe, or do you live your life and plan to be as prepared as possible under any given circumstance to defend yourself and your family? And I choose the latter. I go to plenty of places where I can't carry a gun legally, and I don't carry guns when I can't carry them legally. So thinking about how do we prepare to deal with that ambush, avoiding it isn't realistic. You know, we can do the head on a swivel, know where the exits are kind of a thing. But at the end of the day, when the shooting starts, you know, how do we avoid that getting hit? How do we avoid from getting trapped there? How do we protect our family members? And that's where having a plan in your head, having already rehearsed, having already visualized, maybe if you can, having already gone through good spree killer or active shooter response scenario training, helps you with that script, to be prepared to find cover, find an exit, create barricades, impromptu barricades. You know, there's a thing called a wedget that I carry around as well. Actually, one sitting right here, I'll grab while we're on the call. I keep these in briefcases. I keep these in the diaper bag with the baby. These things are all over the place. These are great for two things. One, locking doors open, doors that will automatically close. These can be used on the hinges to lock them open to help other people evacuate, to be able to make sure that you and your family and anybody following can get out of a door. They're also great for blocking and barricading almost any kind of an inward opening door, like you might find in a public restroom that isn't going to have a lock on it or isn't conveniently locked. Other public doors that can't be locked or can't conveniently be locked can be blocked with this to create a safe zone inside of an area where you can barricade and then look for other improvised tools. You know, it's really not about the gun, it's about the mindset and finding ways to be behind cover or concealment or evade or barricade really are the first steps. And that's things that we talk about in general, but specifically in these gun-free zones.
And so obviously, you know, as we've talked about today in Roseburg, Oregon, there were some folks that were not able to successfully either evade the attack, barricade themselves, or fight back and necessarily win the fight. And of course, we don't have details, and I don't bring the incident up to do anything other than help us to learn how to deal with this kind of a situation, because we do see these situations come up from time to time, and we want people to have answers. So Caleb, let's go to you for a moment, and let's talk about tools and skills that people need to have that have nothing to do with the firearms. What is it that I should know? What is it that the average person should know? What is it that the law enforcement officer should know, so that when this happens again, we have the tools and skills to deal with it the best that we can in the immediate aftermath?
Well, I would say it starts, just to reiterate kind of what Rob was talking about, first your mindset and attitude. Not just rehearsing or going through the scenarios, the what ifs, okay? But part of that mindset is, okay, well, if I have to deal with a threat, fine, I deal with the threat, but a fight's a fight, and with fighting, there's usually people that are injured. Okay, well, how do we deal with those injuries? That's something that part of the attitude and mindset we've got to look at. So it's attitude, mindset, training. Obviously, just not just self-defense techniques training, but the medical training. Sure, there's a need for that because now we've got it may take, like Doc said, it may take minutes. May take hours to get either EMS into that building, into that area, or to get wounded or injured people out of that building. So you kind of have, well, how long does it take? Well, there's plenty of variables there, but there's definitely a need for having medical knowledge on how to deal with immediate life-threatening injuries, and then also having the tools readily accessible for it.
Let's talk specifically, Caleb, about what those injuries that you should expect to be dealing with in this spree killer kind of circumstance. What is it that people need to be most concerned about?
Kind of a long-winded question there, or answer for you.
Sure.
But no, I would say things you need to be thinking about. Obviously, any penetrating trauma. We're talking about holes in the body where there shouldn't be. Okay, whether that's gunshot wounds, stab wounds, maybe even blunt trauma. If it's a large group and there's people stampeding to get out of one single door, we've seen people getting, at a concert a couple of years ago. There was a fire up on the stage, people rushing to get out. There was one exit that anybody knew about, and there were people that were literally crushed to death. But that's not happening as much. But when we're talking about these killing sprees and these active killers scenarios, sure, gunshot wounds, okay, or any type of penetrating trauma. So we're looking at, okay, well, what kind of answers or solutions do we have for that? Well, one would, of course, be tourniquets, pressure dressings, hemostatic agents, stuff like your quick clot combat gauze, chest seals, those type of things, because we're going to be, one, we need to keep all the blood in the container or keep all the blood in the body. Bleeding out is immediate life-threatening injury. Breathing out of holes out of the side of your lungs and your chest, that's bad. So we need to look at, hey, can we patch that chest wall up really quick? So bleeding out, airway compromise, those are usually the two immediate threats that we're going to be concerned about as far as the medical aspect goes.
So you brought up tourniquets, Caleb, and I want to turn to Dr. Adine. And again, this whole conversation that we're having is quite an off-the-cuff conversation. So any of you guys, if I get into territory where you're not comfortable or I'm leading things astray, just direct back the way that you think things should go, and we'll go from there. But Dr. Adine, tourniquets for a long time in first aid were taught as if you put a tourniquet on a limb, you've condemned that limb. And you've been in orthopedic surgery all day, which leads me to believe you might have been working on some limbs. Am I correct about that?
Yeah, a few. As far as tourniquets go, yes, we use tourniquets routinely, actually, in surgery. We usually try to limit it's a pneumatic tourniquet, which is basically a big blood pressure cuff, and we try to limit that for 2 hours at a time. But we can put it up for 2 hours, drop it down for 30 minutes, and put it up again for another 2 hours without major league issues. Now, in the war situation, they've had tourniquets up for hours and hours. They've had guys evacuated out of country to Germany with the tourniquet in place, and still no problems with limb salvage. So it's a myth that a tourniquet will cause a limb to be lost. What you will lose is your life if you don't stop the bleeding. That's the most important thing.
I'm really glad that you summed it up that way. And, the fact that you're using tourniquets today probably in the OR, and you're using those for hours at a time when necessary, when we think about it, even though we may see delays of 30 minutes or 45 minutes or an hour until someone can actually get to medical attention in this kind of an active killer situation, the fact is that if they're bleeding for that amount of time, they're going to lose their whole life. And so it certainly makes sense to use tourniquets. Caleb, can you give us some specific suggestions on tourniquets that you recommend people have on their person to be able to deal with traumatic bleeding?
Sure. There's two actually. In no particular order. I mean, it's when it comes down to it, these two tourniquets, I kind of look at them as, hey, it's Ford versus Chevy. Do I have, so it's first off is your soft T wide from Tactical Medical Solutions, and then the second one would be a combat application tourniquet, or the CAT tourniquet from North American Rescue. Both have a very extensive history of working, to put it bluntly. They've, the Committee on Tactical Combat Casualty Care, which is kind of the leading group of doctors, nurses, medics, corpsmen from the military aspect, running the training for combat medics and corpsmen, and they kind of set the standards of, hey, this is what we expect a tourniquet to do, and they have done that. The Soft T Wide and the CAT. There's several others on the market. I'll just say that, hey, if I had to choose one, then it's, the Soft T Wide or the CAT. Those are the two primary tourniquets that I would choose.
Okay. Good suggestions. Rob, let's bring it back to you for a minute here. You're a professional defensive firearms instructor, and the fact of the matter is this type of medical gear isn't just beneficial when we face some kind of a catastrophic incident like we're talking about in Roseburg, Oregon. It can come in handy and maybe should be on hand at other times. What kind of medical gear do you have on hand at the range for a typical defensive shooting class that you teach?
Yeah, on the range we keep tourniquet. The CAT-T is the one I use in that right-away go-to gunshot wound bag. We keep the Oleus bandage, and I know that Caleb has the correct pronunciation on that. I always screw it up, but
Elias.
The Elias. There's a heavy accent on that one. But we have one of those OLEAS, one of those bandages, which is a great and versatile bandage. We keep a hemostatic agent, and we keep a chest seal. So if we do have a wound that goes through a torso and we need to try to block airflow from places where air shouldn't be flowing, we've got one of those out there as well. And most of the classes I'm driving to throughout the year, so inside of the truck, I have much more extensive equipment to deal with extended bleeding, to deal with all kinds of other injuries, including some of the more advanced stuff, the airway, keeping airways open, things like that. And I always advise people, have that emergency grab it right away kit, and then have the other things separate to deal with other areas you may be qualified in, and certainly don't just have gear that you're not trained in using. It's going to create, I think, a false sense of security. And the one rationalization I've heard people make is, well, I'll have those things on my person or in my area or in my truck in case professional services show up and they need extra gear. To me, that seems like a little bit of a stretch. If the ambulance shows up, they probably have what they need, and I'd hate to see somebody tempted to do more harm than good with a piece of gear that they saw used in an episode of MASH or something once. The other thing, with the baby, I've been carrying some other things that I don't normally carry. We've got an infant EpiPen because we're just not sure what she's allergic to or not, and I know that Caleb and I have talked about these RATS tourniquets, but I've got the baby bag right here. These are not proven yet for use in normal circumstances. I'd much rather have the CAT-T or the Soft T for me, but for the baby, that is one application that I see this potentially being useful for. If something happens to her, we're in a car accident, those bigger tourniquets may or may not be able to fit on her limb, but I keep one of these in the baby bag specifically for that application for her.
Can you give us the name or the spelling of that tourniquet again, Rob, for the infant?
This guy, it's not, it's RATS. It's R.A.T.S. It's a RATS tourniquet from Refactor Tactical, and just one of the asterisks that they mention on those particular tourniquets is potentially better for like a canine or infant, very small child, and that's the main reason I keep that around now. After having talked with Caleb, the jury is still out on adult use with those.
Gotcha.
Yeah, it's just and I just want to tell the fans, the RATS, sure. Rob and I have talked about it. I've talked about it with other colleagues quite extensively. I personally am not a fan of it yet. There's too many cons with it compared to the Soft T Wide and the CAT. And for infants, Doc, you may be able to help us out with this too, a little bit more extensive knowledge and just physiology. But for infants, I usually tell folks, hey, if they're a toddler like baby Pincus there, well then our hands and our pressure dressings might be enough to go ahead and occlude any and to control any external hemorrhaging that we are bleeding that the infant has. There's not, I don't know if, and Doc, correct me, I don't know that many studies comparatively, obviously, with 2 wars on 2 different, locations for over 12 years. We've got a lot of documentation, a lot of case studies, tourniquets on adults, but with tourniquets for pre-hospital settings for infants and toddlers, there's just not near the comparison or the knowledge yet. So it's one of those, something you got to think about whether or not you're going to use an actual tourniquet, regardless if it rats or not. That and canines. Sometimes canines, some people think, hey, well, we can use, their extremities are a little bit different anatomically than humans, so you've got to watch that and know the right placement for that as well.
Well, I can tell you that in children, their blood pressure does run lower, their pulse rate is higher, their respiratory rate is higher, their ability to sustain blood loss is less. They don't tolerate large blood losses. So even though they got young, strong hearts, their safe zone is smaller. So whatever you can do to stop the bleeding, I think, is probably best. Again, it doesn't make a difference if you're worried about the limb if this patient doesn't survive. So stopping the bleeding is number 1, number 2, and number 3, as far as I'm concerned. Whatever way you can do it. If direct pressure works, great. If not, then use a tourniquet. Use whatever you have. Unfortunately, a lot of stuff is not designed for small children, and we see this in the medical world all over the place, not just in first aid supplies, but in airways and other things. They're very specific for children, and a lot of hospitals don't even have children-specific stuff. In your general ER, they may not have the stuff for the very small children. So, it's a problem throughout the entire community, not just in the first aid community.
Right. Dr. Dean, let me ask you a question about that. You said that the small child's tolerance for blood loss is less. There's less of a safe zone. I would assume, and please correct me if I'm wrong about this, I would assume that that's because the total blood volume is less. Therefore, if a child loses X amount of blood, it's a larger percentage of the total amount of blood in the body. Is that a correct assumption?
Yes, correct. That's very correct.
Okay.
And children can bleed out fast. I've seen it happen, and believe me, you got to get in there. If they lose too much blood, they end up with multiple organ failure. They get lung, liver, kidney. It's a mess. So you want to avoid that at all costs. Even if you can get fluids into them without necessarily replacing blood, just keeping the blood, keeping the volume up, that actually has some protective effect. But losing those little box cars that carry oxygen, that's a big problem. You got to keep the oxygen going to the brain and the organs.
And that's really actually an important idea that you just brought up there. That's why we want to keep the blood inside the body, because it's delivering the oxygen. Even if there's no more new oxygen coming in, that blood is still, if it's circulating, even through compressions, is delivering oxygen, and that's the key. Let's shift from tourniquets just a little bit here, guys. Rob listed out some other tools that he has in his med kit. Caleb, you and Dr. Dean also talked about those. What if we have severe bleeding somewhere that a tourniquet isn't appropriate? It's not on an extremity. What do we do there?
One thing you can look at is your pressure dressings. The pressure dressing that Rob mentioned, the Elias, that happens to be one of my favorites. That's like 6 bandages in one, to be honest. So for the minimalist, I carry one. Sure, Rob and I, we kind of laugh like, wow, there's something that we actually both agree on as far as equipment. You ask 10 guys, 10 different holster suggestions. Same thing with, firearms, but with medical, we were both like, yes, the Elias, it's awesome. You've got 5 bandages in one with that. Another thing is hemostatic agents. That's something that's been kind of new here in the past, say 12, 15 years. And we've seen a lot of progress with hemostatic agents across the board and a lot of advancements. So people think, too, that, I'll go to, their local sporting goods store, buy the hemostatic agent like Quick Clot Combat Gauze and think, that's my problem solver for everything right there. Well, no, it may be your second or third tier tool, if you will. But you've got pressure dressings, you've got just rolled gauze. Hemostatic agents, rolled gauze, I have yet to come across a bleeder I can't control with enough rolled cotton Curlex rolls and 6-inch ace wrap. That's kind of old school stuff,
Outstanding, Caleb. That's good information. I'm just checking the internet here to see if there's any new information. So I apologize, folks, for cruising around and poking about just to see what's going on. One of the things that I think about when I think about situations like the Boston bombing, when I think about situations like we're dealing with, unfortunately, today in Roseburg, Oregon, when we've got this number of people that are in a single location that are injured, I question whether or not the correct amount of medical gear is going to be right there ready to go. There are very few people that carry the medical gear that they need to deal with traumatic bleeding, and that's unfortunate. Caleb, talk to us a little bit about improvisation of medical gear, and I want you to approach it. And you and I have talked about this before.
Sure.
I want you to approach this, with the vigor you usually do. So go for it.
Sure. Improvised medicine. Folks always ask the question, hey, what should I, what if I don't have a tourniquet, or what can I use a belt, or what if I don't have this? Well, how do I improvise that? And it's the way I look at it is I tell folks, hey, it's 2015 and getting towards the end of 2015. We've had there's a lot of empty chairs around the dining room tables across America. And I'm speaking about our armed forces and our armed service members, because, hey, we tried to improvise. And I'm not knocking our service members. I'm just saying those medics and corpsmen and those soldiers, they were trying to do anything, and sometimes their plan was to improvise. But here in the civilian world, I see a lot of civilians saying, hey, well, if I don't have that equipment, what do I use? And I'm like, well, why don't you? That's the quote. I'm like, okay, well, do you carry a defensive firearm with you as a concealed carrier? And they're like, yeah. I said, okay, well, then do you carry a rock? And they're like, no. And I said, well, then why are you planning to improvise your medical equipment? It's no different than trying to improvise a defensive tool, okay? So don't plan to improvise. Is learning how to use improvised equipment important? Absolutely. Or taking a vacuum cleaner and trying to figure out how to use the extension cord as a tourniquet or something? Sure, okay. I mean, I'm just far out there. But how to build improvised tools to use as tourniquets, chest seals, splints, pressure dressings, yes, there is a huge need for that, because what happens if you are a family of 4, you've used up your tourniquet, your one pressure dressing, and your hemostatic agent, but there's 4 people in the vehicle. That means you have 4 injuries at minimum, maybe, and each person may have multiple injuries. If we're talking about active killers, well then sure, somebody may get hit twice, 2 or 3 times. And students for the past couple of years have realized during our classes, like, wow, I used up all the contents of that one individual kit very quickly on just perhaps one injury on one person, let alone multiple people. So there is definitely a need to learn how to improvise stuff, but don't plan on it. That's my go-to and first line defense against major bleeding is I'm going to improvise a tourniquet. Well, now I've got to find a stick. I've got to find a strap. Then you have to put it all together and build it, and then you have to make sure it works, and then it has to stay on there. Well, that's a lot of what ifs. So if we can eliminate that, and hey, I'm going to go ahead and take the initiative to carry a commercially made tourniquet like a Soft T-Wide or the CAT, then that's great. I'll do that. But if I run out, then I still do need to know that basic knowledge of, hey, what else can I think out of the box as a backup or, worst case scenario. Absolutely, improvised medicine, there is a need for it.
Caleb, I think I'm sorry, did you have something to say there, John, or is that you, Caleb? Okay. One of the things that I think about when you bring that up is one of the posts that you shared on social media this past week. There was a doc who was on a transatlantic flight, I believe, where there was a toddler who did not have their asthma medication, and they were able to make shift and use an adult inhaler and some tools to be able to deliver proper doses of inhaler to the child and keep the child comfortable and possibly alive during this transatlantic flight where there's just not a CVS to swing by to pick up a new prescription. The first thing to do is to make sure that you have the tools you need. If you are dependent on asthma medication, or if you could be, you need to have that medication. As Rob mentioned, he's got an infant EpiPen. There's really no substitute for those kinds of things. And I think that we can look at the OR that Dr. Adine is in right now and think to ourselves, if we could carry that around with us and we knew we were going to need that stuff, it would make sense to have those tools ready to go. and that's what advanced life support units are trying to do, is bring everything they can to the table. Dr. Dean, thoughts about improvised medicine? When you're in that OR, how often do you have to improvise, or are you folks pretty well prepared to deal with what you have to deal with?
Yeah, no, we're usually pretty prepared. Now, whenever I plan a surgery, I have plan A, plan B, plan C, and I have the equipment available to do that. Now, we have a cart for, a crash cart for cardiac arrest. We also have a cart for malignant hyperthermia, which is a rare but deadly reaction to inhaled anesthetics. And there are specific drugs that you use for that are kept on the cart.
Mm-hmm.
If we have a child who has a muscular dystrophy type disease, that cart sits right outside the OR, because those are the kids that are prone. We use agents that are not inhaled agents, like propofol for their anesthetic, a la Michael Jackson, if you want to think about that. That's propofol. But for the most part, we try not to improvise. We try to have the stuff that we need. Now, sometimes you get into a place where you have to do problem solving, and you may get there and see that, well, I may need to have this tool instead, and you may have to get that. But for the most part, we try to plan in advance so we know what we're going to do.
Very good. And it makes sense for us as everyday folks, as firearms instructor, etc. We want to make sure that we have the tools that we think we're probably going to need. And if you carry a gun and you think you might be involved in violence, then you should probably be thinking about the fact that you're probably going to be involved in some medical treatment of people, or could be involved in some medical treatment and some serious injuries in that immediate aftermath. And we're seeing that today, again, with the tragic circumstances at Umpqua College in Roseburg, Oregon. And I did some looking, and Rob, I don't know if you have any additional information. I know you've probably been cruising the internet. It looks like it's confirmed with 10 deceased and 20 injured. So, unfortunate circumstances, but circumstances we need to think about and be prepared for. So what I want to do now, gentlemen, is, we need to start moving towards wrapping things up. We've been on for about 45 minutes here. Couple of things. We've got folks that are joining us live. Folks, I haven't mentioned this yet today, but I do have up on the right-hand side of the screen the comments and the questions section. If you've got thoughts, if you've got comments that you'd like to address to Dr. Dean, pediatric orthopedic surgeon who joined us, Caleb Causey, owner of Lone Star Medics, and former Army medic Rob Pincus, professional defensive firearms instructor, or myself, please feel free to type in those messages, those questions, and let us know what it is you'd like us to answer. And, let's go back to Rob. Rob, tell us a little bit about the School Attacker Response course, and if folks are interested in trying to bring a course like that to their area, to their schools, what is it that they could do to make that happen?
They can contact us at ICE Training Company. We've got. They can also go to School Attacker Response on the internet, and just obviously School Attacker Response course. The SART course stresses three things. It stresses the importance of evading, getting away if you can, barricading if you can't get away, and then of course responding. And the response, and I'm getting mixed reports. It looks like concealed carry may very well have been a legal option for different students or faculty on that campus in Oregon. I'm trying to confirm that now. But either way, we talked about improvised medicine, and I think I mentioned in passing the importance of improvised defensive tools, but that really isn't something we should just gloss over. The fact is that improvised defensive tools, whether we're talking about the kids in a middle school classroom, we're talking about college kids, we're talking about people at the hospital or corporate office, they are all around us. The Polypalooza event, the training conference that you helped host and run this year in August, every tool's a weapon, or every tool can be a weapon just as long as you hold it right. Whether it's a fire extinguisher being used as a blunt instrument, a fire extinguisher being used to blind someone or distract someone, or even just make the floors slippery. Books in schools, chairs, broomsticks, pens, backpacks can be used full of books worn across the front of the chest to stop a huge number of the types of bullets that would be fired in any kind of a spree attack. There are limitless defensive tools once you start wrapping your mind around it. And I would just, obviously plug personaldefensenetwork.com as a resource for videos and articles on these topics. The medical topics from Caleb, you and I have both talked about family defense, and a lot of the video information from the School Attacker Response course DVD is actually available. at personaleventsnetwork.com as well, and most of that stuff is free. It really is a matter of just coming up with that plan. You know, the A, B, and the C that the doc mentioned, absolutely incredibly important. That C, by the time you get down there, you've got to be thinking about taking advantage of the resources that maybe you didn't bring, you wish you had, but are all around you. And it doesn't have to be specific. It doesn't have to be specific to a venue. It can be generalized to the types of things you're looking for. Things to be thrown, things to be used as impact tools, things to be used to blind and distract. The proverbial hot cup of coffee or the cleanser that's under the sink in the public bathroom kind of thing.
Outstanding points, Rob, and I think it's important and maybe even critical for people to think about that. And the reality is when you find yourself in that situation, you need to push through the disbelief that it's happening to you, because obviously it is happening to you. It happened to some folks today, unfortunately, in Oregon, and hopefully there are some folks that pushed through and brought a stop. It sounds like the shooter was actually detained, and so it'll be interesting to see how it is that has happened. It's not the typical set of circumstances that we see in these types of situations, so maybe there will be some things that we can learn from that. Dr. Adine, thoughts that you have on gun-free zones, Second Amendment rights, medical concepts for families, and definitely where it is that folks can reach out to you and connect with you, your organization, etc.
Well, this weekend I was at Gun Rights Policy Conference, and I actually talked about the terrorist threat against hospitals worldwide. Mm-hmm. Most people don't know that there have been over 100 attacks against hospitals in 43 countries since 1981. There have been 775 people killed and over 1,700 people wounded. Hospitals are a target. They have a lot of people. They have a very, very preferable audience for a terrorist group because they have women and children. Most hospitals are not secure, so they're easy, soft targets. They contain drugs. They contain biological agents, and they contain radiological agents. I talked in my talk. I talked about the attack at Budyunovsk, Russia, in 1995, where they had 150 terrorists take 2,000 casualties, and there were several hundred. I mean, take 2,000 hostages, and there were several hundred casualties out of that. And as a result, the Russian government was forced to capitulate to Chechnya. And that wasn't even planned. They were actually going to go hijack an airplane at the nearby airport, and they got detained by the local police, and they ended up having to fight it out, and they had ended up in the hospital. So they hadn't even planned on taking the hospital, but they reached their goals by taking a large number of people in a hospital, and they're just not prepared. So that's one of the things that I'm very concerned about. As far as safety goes, in children and sports, we talk about using proper equipment. The places where I see kids get hurt the most are the monkey bars, okay, and also trampolines, okay, especially when you have more than one kid on the trampoline. Oh, Dad, yes, I know.
2 for 2 this summer. 1 on a trampoline and 1 on the monkey bars.
Okay,
bones.
So see, there you go. You meet the statistics. So when you have kids on a trampoline, one at a time, the big kid usually hits the trampoline, comes up. The little kid is coming down, and the little kid hits the trampoline and either breaks their tibia or they get thrown and break their elbow. They're pretty high energy injuries, and they can be pretty devastating. Normal sports activities, we see kids with broken bones. I just got done fixing a humerus, and a 13-year-old from playing football got tackled. We see kids, just falling and, crashing their bikes and getting all the normal stuff. And that stuff, some of it may be preventable, but, we all have to live a little bit too. And that's why they have people like me around to fix that.
That's exactly right. And I'd love to have you back on, Dr. Dean, at another time. Those are some of the topics we were going to cover in depth today. But, I just really felt the need to get people some quality information to help them calm themselves, have conversations with family members, and make decisions about how to lead their lives in the situation. So, I'd love to have you and Caleb both, and I'm sure Rob someday will be a guest here again as well. He's gotten 2 in a row. I don't know what that guy's got going on, but it's some mojo.
He's got the Pincus magic.
Where can folks find you, John?
I'm at drgo.us. That's Doctors for Responsible Gun Ownership. There are also several other people who write for us, and we cover a lot of the topics, like the Bloomberg people and NIH when they come out with these bogus studies. We'll rebut it. We have John Lott, of course, who is just a fantastic guy, and we certainly use a lot of his stuff. But we also have people who analyze the studies and rebut them. So you can find me at DRGO, and then my colleagues also. There's a lot of good stuff. We put out 2 blogs a week, and we're on Facebook. We're on Twitter as well, under Doctors for Responsible Gun Ownership.
Very good. And Dr. Edin, I appreciate you taking the time. Caleb, tell us, give us some parting thoughts, and let us know where people can track you down.
Paul, they can check us out at lonestarmedics.com. And we're actually a contributor for Personal Defense Network. I agree with Rob and what's going on, the folks that are involved with the Personal Defense Network as well. Like Rob said, there's a lot of valuable information there for average Joe citizen, Mm-hmm. Yeah, lonestarmedics.com, or you can find us on Facebook or Instagram now. You've got me convinced to go there, so I'm toying with Instagram now.
Outstanding. Well, guys, one of the things that I like to do before I sign out after each show is just acknowledge my guests for what it is that I appreciate. Dr. Edin, I appreciate you working hard today. I mean, you've said you've gotten 5 out of 6 surgeries taken care of. You took some time and either worked really hard to get 5 done or did the shuffling you needed to do to be able to make the time to talk with us. And I really appreciate that. I appreciate the hard work you're doing for the kids that you're treating there, and at the same time trying to get good quality medical information out to our viewership. And I want to acknowledge you for that. I appreciate that very much.
Welcome.
Rob, I'm very appreciative of you, Rob, jumping on at the last moment. We found ourselves in this situation with these very unfortunate events in Oregon, and on short notice, you were ready to rock and roll and jump on. And so I appreciate your professionalism and the quality information that you had to share with us with virtually no notice. And I also want to acknowledge you for the fact that you reached over into the baby bag and pulled out a tourniquet, and you really do carry a tourniquet for your baby. And I think that's awesome. So thank you for that. And I think she thanks you as well.
Yeah, for sure. I appreciate you making the forum available to us and getting this information out quick. I know you guys had other plans today. I'm going to jump back over and take care of the baby, not with a tourniquet, but with a diaper. So I appreciate it. PersonalDefenseNetwork.com and ictraining.us.
Excellent. And Caleb, you're kind of dark there, so I can't actually bring you up, so it's going to be me that they get to look at when I'm talking about you. I want to acknowledge you for bringing quality medical information for people on a consistent basis, and not just the high torque, high speed stuff, talking about things like hydration and making sure that people are carrying the gear that you're talking about and teaching with. I think those are 2 really important things that you're doing very well, and I appreciate that very much. And of course, I'd be remiss if I didn't let folks know that you'd be here with Safety Solutions Academy the first weekend in November, teaching dynamic first aid, which is a great first aid course for the whole family. And on the second day, on Sunday, you'll be teaching a range response course that will really help folks that are in a shooting range role, whether it's a range master, range officer, or a frequent shooter, a firearms instructor. Give them the skills that if they face that undesirable gunshot wound, or they end up in a situation where they've got lots of people that are hurt, they'll have the skills. So I want to acknowledge you for getting that information out there. I really do appreciate that, Caleb, so thank you very much. Finally, folks, I do, again, want to, I'm kind of at a loss for words. I'm saddened by the news out of Oregon today, and I want to let folks know that these events, today there were millions of Americans that went to community colleges all across the country, and there are 10 that didn't come home, and that's very unfortunate. But the fact is, if we look at it from a statistical standpoint, carrying on our lives is the right thing to do. But carrying on our lives with the full knowledge and the skills and the tools to be able to carry them on the best we can, I think that's the correct way to proceed. So, in the days that follow this this unfortunate circumstance, number one, put your best wishes with those folks that are in Oregon that are struggling right now with this situation and will be for years to come. And at the same time, seek answers and preparations for yourself and those that you love so that you'll be ready to deal with these situations should you ever face them. I wrote down a lot of resources about today's show, and I want to give you an opportunity to get some of those resources. And the best way for you to do that is to jump onto our mailing list. What I'd like you to do is just get that cell phone out, and you're going to create a new text message to the number 33444. Again, that number is 33444. And you're simply going to send the word TPL Weekly. That's Tango Papa Lima Weekly, the Protected Life Weekly, TPL Weekly, to 33444. You can then put in your email address to the reply, and we'll get you a link to the page that has all of these resources that we talked about today, where you can pick up the tourniquet, the hemostatic agent. Dr. Adine has already given us a book that he prefers that people take a look at. We'll ask Rob and Caleb for those kinds of resources as well, and those will all be right there in one place for you for today's show. Folks, thanks for tuning in. I very much appreciate it. Those of you that were here live, thank you for tuning in live. Those of you that are watching in the replay, if you have questions or comments or concerns, please shoot an email to paul@safetysolutionsacademy.com. I would love to hear from you. Again, I would like to say thank you so much to all of our guests. To our audience, get on out there, get yourself some training. When you do, make sure you keep it simple. Please stay safe, and as always, have a great day.